千里之行，始于足下. A journey of 1,000 miles begins beneath the feet. We now gather in the Tao to travel the journey together. Welcome to Tao Talks with Derek Lin, where we take a deep dive into the Daodejing by Lao Zi. As ever, I would like to extend a warm welcome to one and all. Thank you for joining us. I want to invite you to center your thoughts and direct your attention to this moment in time, to the here and now, to be fully present and mindfully aware as we all ready ourselves for this sacred process in the Tao with one another. This story is a historical tale about a historical figure, someone who walked the earth a long time ago. And specifically, when I say long time ago, I'm talking about ancient China during the Three Kingdoms period. There was a man by the name of Guanyin. Now, Guanyin lived in the mountains, in an area where the only source of water was a communal well. Every day, people would come to the well to fetch water. Oftentimes, there would be a lot of people all trying to get water at around the same time. So, of course, as you can imagine, everyone wanted to get water quickly, soon, bring it back to their homes. So there would be some jostling. People would want to get ahead of the line, and sometimes tempers would flare. The situation would get out of hand. People would push and shove one another. They would have heated arguments. I got here first. I'm ahead of you. They would even have physical altercations. That is, there would be fistfights. This will escalate. They would even bring weapons to the fight. It was not a good situation. It damaged the harmony in that mountain community. So Guanyin saw all this. He became very concerned. And he thought about what could he do to bring peace and order back to the community. In contemplation, he felt that using force would not be a good idea. When you use force, people might behave if in that moment they're forced to behave. But they will be resentful. That resentment might simmer beneath the surface. It might eventually boil over with greater intensity. It could erupt. So rather than to use force, Guanyin came up with a different plan. He went out and bought many buckets for holding water. And in the very early hours of the morning, before other people got up, he went to the well with his buckets, and he spent many hours filling all the buckets with water, toiling through the early hours of the morning, and he left all the filled buckets out in the open around the well. When people arrived later on that morning, they were all surprised. They saw the buckets full of water ready for them, waiting for them. They were amazed. It was certainly much more convenient than everybody with their own buckets fighting to be first in line. So they asked around, who was it? Who did this for everybody? They finally figured out after some time that it was Guanyin. And the reason why he did it was to prevent more flare-ups, more violence. The virtuous act from Guanyin, being so thoughtful and considerate, caused everyone to reflect upon the wrongness of their contention with one another. So while they were ready to fight, here was someone who was thinking about everybody and thinking about the greater good for the community. They regretted their past actions. It was not worthy of them. So from that point on, the people in that community no longer fought one another for the water. They all became courteous and polite. Peace and harmony prevailed around that well in the mountains. The end. So in thinking about a situation like this, Tao sages definitely have thought about the best way to live using examples like this one and many others. So one of the Tao sages from ancient times is Mengzi, in the West known as Mencius, known as second only to Confucius in terms of the ancient great teachers. So Mengzi talked about this. He taught this particular Tao. So he asked the question, what might be the best way to win people over to your side? Now, having heard the story, you know that virtue would be best. Without the benefits of the Tao teaching, what we have seen is that many people will automatically resort to force, like might makes right, my way or the highway. So what Mengzi said was that 以力服人者，非先服也. What it means is that when you use force to force other people to see things your way, do things your way, or join your cause, well, they're not doing so from the heart. That is, they're not doing so with sincerity. So it is a false kind of obedience, a false kind of compliance. But what if you use virtue instead? On that, Mengzi says, 以德服人者，先悦而臣服也. That is, if you use virtue instead of force to win people over, they come around. And 先悦, they come around, they join you gladly. 臣服, they join you willingly from the heart with sincerity. They really are on your side and not just pretending to be. So there's definitely link here from what Mengzi said to what Lao Zi wrote. And you can see the connection yourself. When you apply the advice to the king to your own life, then you see that the positive approach so often is the best approach. And the Tao sages, the Tao masters will say, no, it is always the best approach. And let's go ahead and summarize what they would teach using a two-column setup here. What happens when you use force? What happens when you use virtue? And compare them. So when you use force, you force people, you bend them to your will. What happens is you get temporary results. The results you get cannot last long. When the force of intimidation is removed, people revert back to what they were doing before. What happens with virtue? Well, when you utilize virtue and you convert people to your cause, to your way of thinking, that change is permanent. You've won over true friends and allies. They think along the same way that you do. They will be permanently on your side. See things your way. The second thing that we have seen from the example of what happened in the well is that if you use force, you get only the appearance of compliance. So it's only at the surface level. That's not the Tao. The Tao goes much deeper than that to the heart. So the Tao would say that you want genuine cooperation and alignment. You want people to align with you. That way, their support of you is true. And then yet another thing we can tell is that when you use force, you arouse resentment. People may not say it, they may not even show it, but they definitely have ill will towards you because you use force on them. And if instead you had used virtue, the situation is quite different. It's not resentment, it's harmony. People are glad to follow you. They do so of their own free will. They will support you however they can. And this gives us the last contrast, which links with the current chapter, with the first two lines of the chapter. Domination gives rise to a greater force in opposition. If you use force, you may end up with a greater force to oppose you. Whereas if you use virtue, you inspire people to come around on your side. That inspiration gives rise not to an opposing force, but a greater force to support you. So it's very different. And this is how it is linked to the first two lines of the Daodejing. When people no longer feel force, they bring about greater force. You can tell this is all about what happens when you use strength or force or power, the tyrannical kind of power, to get people to come around your way. It would be better if you go with the right-hand column. Our meeting has come to an end, but the journey continues on. Let us all travel safely so we can meet again. Until next time, may the Tao fill you with peace and happiness.